Yes, we can. Thank you. God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
We all have in mind this incredible day of November 4th, 2008. With the election of Barack Obama, a huge hope swept across America and the entire world. With Barack Obama, a new world is opening to us. But do you know that one of the new president's major challenges is the Green Revolution? His mission? Fight against global warming, reduce his country's energy dependency, and get America out of the crisis. And all of that thanks to a new green economy called green business.
We will restore science to its rightful place, and we will harness the sun and the winds and the soil to fuel our cars and run our factories, and we will transform our schools and colleges and universities to meet the demands of a new age.
During all of his campaign, Obama said it and repeated it in every fashion. He wants to get over the Bush era on the environmental issue. Can we call it the end of Bush's America? That same which refused to sign the Kyoto Treaty on the climate? The end of polluters America who privilege coal and oil? The end of America which despises the environment? It remains to be seen. But one thing is for sure. If today the most powerful man on the planet sets himself the goal of taking the world's leadership in this green revolution, we must take a very close look. If America becomes aware that the challenge of the 21st century is the environmental one, nothing will ever be the same as before, and that concerns us all.
Please, everybody be seated. Thank you. Good morning.
Once he just set foot in the White House, Barack Obama proves that his environmental plan isn't just a promise made during his campaign. In front of all Washington, he sets his priorities. $150 billion will be invested in green energies within the 10 years to come.
It will be the policy of my administration to reverse our dependence on foreign oil while building a new energy economy that will create millions of jobs.
Another commitment, increase by 25% the use of renewable energies for the consumption of electricity in the country by 2025. Obama made a pledge on a very precise program which he signed. To implement this Green Boost Economy program, Obama has created, for the first time in the history of the United States, a green team, a team entirely devoted to the environment. A strategic group made of top-notch scientists, including Stephen Chu, Nobel Prize in Physics, a very relevant symbol. But beyond the symbol, let's not be mistaken, the Green Revolution isn't only going to the White House. This environmental awakening of consciousness already echoes in a large part of the American society. In America, it's well known, everything starts with a prayer. And then when the church gets involved, it's a sign that the change will be considerable. This man who's peacefully driving his hybrid car on a Sunday morning before the Riverside Church is far from being just a mere priest. According to Time magazine, Richard Cizik is one of the 100 most influential personalities on the planet. A hardline Republican for many years, he was even one of the closest friends of President George Bush. But one day, Richard Cizik got a revelation when he realized the dangers of global warming.
That changed really my life because I began to put together for the first time what the Bible teaches and what is happening to our earth. And so that I call my second conversion. My first conversion was to Jesus, my second conversion was to caring for the earth.
Evangelists like Richard Cizik represent more than 100 million people in America. They have considerable influence, especially among Republicans.
If these evangelicals will persuade Republicans then I think we're going to have bipartisan climate legislation. But even if the Republicans don't convert, let's face it, they should, and vote for this but if they don't, the evangelicals will still, through churches such as this church, change America in what is aptly called the greening of America.
Richard Cizik experienced his revelation on a trip. A few months ago, he decides to go on the field trip with scientists in Alaska. During this journey, he realizes by himself that the planet is in danger through the melting of glaciers. He understands it's urgent to act and change the mentalities of his faithful.
When we die, God is not going to ask us how He created this earth and whether He did it in 6 days or 6 billion years. No, He knows already that. He will say to us, when we die, He will say, what did you do with what I created? What did you do with what you were given? And we'll all have to answer that question. So God bless you all. Thank you. But what we Christians, evangelicals in particular, have been saying is that it's not just a political issue, it's not just a scientific issue, it's not just an environmental, it is a moral and a spiritual issue. And the Bible is pretty clear. In the first book it says in Genesis, care and protected. In the last book of the Bible, Revelation 11:18, it says, quoting God now, I will destroy those who destroy the earth. Now, I don't know all that means, but I think it's a pretty good warning not to destroy this earth. And I happen to think that those big industries, the oil and gas, utility, and other industries you see that for so long have been using their dollars, their campaign dollars, to persuade Republicans not to do this. I happen to think those organizations, those businesses, those corporate entities, they are going, I have to say, as a preacher, they are going to suffer the fate, you see, of what is the consequences of that sin. And frankly, if America doesn't go green, the rest of the world will, and then they'll sell their products to us. And so either we get it, change our head and our minds and our hearts, or the rest of the world will leave us in the dust. And so in green we can, yes, with God's help.
To become green, one of the most important challenges facing America is undoubtedly the battle for coal. A battle we don't really hear about in Europe, but one which could change the world situation in terms of energy. Here, coal is considered as black gold, the first source of electricity in the country. Some states depend on it over 80%. The United States hold the greatest reserve of coal in the world. But once burnt, this fossil releases a huge amount of carbon dioxide, that is CO2. It's the highest polluting source of energy available. So today, the challenge for the United States is trying to turn coal into a clean source of energy. Jack has been working in Pittsburgh in the coal mines of Pennsylvania for more than 30 years.
Personally, no, I can't imagine America without coal. Coal is still king as far as I'm concerned.
During all these years, Jack has seen clouds of pollution darken the sky of Pittsburgh.
I think we need to clean the atmosphere, and I believe that we can, but I believe we still can use coal. I think a lot of people disagree with me, but with the technologies, as I said, the different agencies and industry as well, I think that they're coming out with newer and better technologies to clean the coal and make the environment to go along with the green technologies. I certainly hope so, anyhow.
Near the most important mines of Pennsylvania, the state's energy department has set a research lab. George Guthrie has been working for the government for 10 years. His mission is to lower the coal emissions of carbon dioxide.
In our labs, we're trying to understand how you can put CO2 underground safely for long periods of time.
The goal is to take back the CO2 emissions coming out of plants during the combustion of coal, then through a pipeline to inject them deep under the Earth's surface in waterproof geological reservoirs. The goal is to lock the CO2 in these reservoirs.
So we study different aspects of rocks where we're trying to understand, for example, if we put carbon dioxide into coal or into sandstone or limestone or other types of geologic materials, how those materials will respond over the long periods of time that we need to store CO2. So one thing we're trying to look at here is we're putting coal into this unit where we can inject CO2 at very high pressures and very high temperatures and study how the coal responds to interacting with the CO2.
$1 billion a year. That's the amount invested by the United States for this research, a technology which works in the lab but not yet on a larger scale and which remains very pricey.
The U.S. Department of Energy has a program to understand the technology necessary for carbon dioxide capture and storage, and the goal is to identify the technology and to understand those technologies by 2020 so that they're ready for commercialization by 2020.
For some environmentalists like Al Gore or the Greenpeace organization, clean coal for 2020 is a fantasy. Others think we'll need at least 40 years to make it work.
Our clean coal technology currently is mostly accomplished at a research scale. The next step in this is developing the technology to a manner that can be transferred to the industrial setting through patents, through open literature and collaborations.
The stakes are so high that the government, but also private companies, invest massively. In this sector, the US are competing harshly with Chinese startup companies. Everyone hopes to make billions of dollars from royalties that such a patent could generate. It's here, at the Energy and Science Department, that the Obama administration decides to fund research on the energies of the future. Stephen Koonin is the Deputy Secretary of Energy. He works for the Green Team, and he's the right-hand man of Stephen Chu, the Nobel Prize winner.
First of all, as we think about changing the energy system, you have to realize that these are very long time scale problems. Coal accounts for about half of the U.S. electricity, and that's not going to disappear overnight. And even if it did disappear, we'd have to replace the energy by something else. So the ability to use coal in an environmentally responsible way, both local pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, is very important, and we're putting a big push on carbon capture and storage. I think it's going to take decades. On the other hand, this administration has made, I think, an excellent start in defining the problems and pointing to the paths forward for the next decade or so.
Pennsylvania is one of the most devoted states for that matter. Its entire economy relies on the coal industry. And this man, Edward Randall, governor of Pennsylvania, knows the issue better than anyone else.
If we can find a way to capture and sequester carbon, then coal becomes a huge usable resource for us in America. And we are the Saudi Arabia of coal. Germany has a lot of coal, Russia has a lot of coal, but we are the Saudi Arabia. If we can find a way to capture and sequester carbon from coal production, bingo.
With their research on clean coal but also on energy efficiency and intelligent electrical systems, America prepares its new industrial revolution, the Green Revolution. The country's second religion is the dollar, and here nothing goes without money in business. In the business district of Washington towards K Street, investors are looking for the environmental startup, which will experience an economic boom tomorrow. And the race for innovation is at full throttle. Transformation of waste or algae into fuel. Batteries of the future. Most energy productive solar panel system. Recuperation of tidal energy. In 2008, investments in green technologies weigh $7 billion. Those who funded the internet revolution now fund the green revolution. Investors like Ben Franklin bet on many young promising companies. By betting on 10 companies like that, Terrence Hicks and James Gambino, his associate, hope to be partners tomorrow with the new Bill Gates.
Cautious approach, but I think the other vision I see is
It's very important to invest in green businesses because, as we know, fossil fuels, there's a limited amount of natural resources out there, and I think that can't be denied. Green technologies are the business of the future.
One of the green startups in which Ben Franklin has bet millions of dollars for 7 years is called Power and Energy. Here, the team, led by Al Stubman, works to find a clean source of fuel. They extract hydrogen from diesel. Then they develop a system capable of purifying the hydrogen in order to change it into a non-polluting fuel.
This is a complete purifier cell. Hydrogen comes in, goes through the system, gets purified, and then comes out. And that goes to the fuel cell.
They're going to get about.
The goal of Al Stubman in the long term is to leave diesel in order to make this non-polluting fuel based on hydrogen coming from other sources of energy.
This could be a very, very profitable business. Our business could be used to create energy from many, many sources of fuel and be used in everything from emergency power to powering automobiles and motorcycles in the future. We think that we have the best technology, and with working with other partners, corporate partners, we think we can be a leader in supplying hydrogen for fuel cells.
But the competition is ferocious. Al Stubman knows that he will have to be the first one to come up with a patent. If a lab in Beijing or Tel Aviv get ahead of him with a more efficient discovery, he will lose everything. There's no room for second best. If startups like Power and Energy and 100 others work on clean technologies, the biggest automobile industries like General Motors put a double amount of efforts to come up with a new generation of cars. Vehicles that would only release water vapor, petroleum-free, a revolution in America. In short, this may be the car of the future. Who would have thought that could happen in the land of the four-wheel a few years ago? This research carried out on cars is fundamental in many other sectors. We also work on techniques to better stock and redistribute renewable energies. The US are therefore the world's first producer of wind energy, in close competition with China. This market represents $11 billion, should be multiplied by 8 in the next 5 years. America has become the world's leader in solar power, notably in Texas or even in California. This industry should grow by more than 50% a year until 2012. Research is in progress, but already more and more Americans are testing houses where everything can be recycled. Here, everything is designed to save energy with recycling. We are in the home of Scott Sklar, president of a group of consultants in green tech existing since 1995.
I doubled the space of the house, but cut its overall energy use by a third. The building is powered totally by the solar photovoltaic roofing shingles and the wind turbine, and then augmented by a hydrogen fuel cell. In all cases, the electricity of the three technologies are stored in a battery bank, and it provides all the power of the building all year.
An environment-friendly citizen, an innovator, and a visionary, he's used every possible technique to make his house energy efficient.
I think most Americans now are gearing up. More money than ever is going into investing in these companies that are making these different technologies. But frankly, my business is working with the people, the companies, mixed-use developers, and governments who want to buy these technologies. it's going to be easier. Remember, cars, you had to crank up to get started. That obviously we don't do anymore. And I had some of the earliest cell phones in the big bags that people would laugh at me, that of course now are miniaturized. So the same thing is going to happen with these technologies. It's going to be lower cost, easier to use, and much more consumer friendly. What the house symbolizes is that there is enough commercial technology that everybody can access, and you don't have to be a movie star in Hollywood to use it.
For this environmental pioneer, expert in renewable energies, turning America into a green country is already a reality. At the prestigious New York Times, one man has a front row seat to measure how things are changing. His name is Tom Friedman. 3 times a Pulitzer Prize winner, he's the author of the bestseller on global warming, which was translated into 20 languages and sold millions of copies.
I want to see 10,000 green innovators in 10,000 green garages and green labs, trying 10,000 things, 1,000 of which will be promising, 100 of which will be really cool, and 2 of which will be the next green Google and green Microsoft.
Today, green is publicized everywhere on the big walls of big cities. But let's not be mistaken. If America has made the strategic choice to turn green, it's of course for environmental and economic reasons. But not only. The main concern, it's a matter of national defense. A long time before Obama's election, the Joint Chiefs of Staff became aware that the country's security would have to rely on a new energy policy. At the Pentagon, the triggering factor for this new strategy was 9/11.
We can tell you what we're hearing from air traffic control is that
in the planes that crash on the towers, 15 of the 19 terrorists come from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is one of the main oil suppliers to the US. From that very day, the point of view of the military and of politicians, ranging from Bush to Obama, radically changes.
America's dependence on oil is one of the most serious threats that our nation has faced. It bankrolls dictators, pays for nuclear proliferation, and funds both sides of our struggle against terrorism.
Jim Woolsey is the former CIA director under the Clinton administration. He's one of the first ones who gave the alarm.
Well, 9/11 illustrated to Americans that oil fuels the terrorism that killed thousands of us in the Twin Towers and in the Pentagon. And there is very little sympathy for the oil producing and exporting and monopolizing countries in the United States, whether it's Saudi Arabia or Russia.
This energy crisis will be one of the reasons for the war in Iraq. 3/4 of the GIs killed in Iraq fell during attacks led by Al-Qaeda on oil convoys. These deadly attacks reinforce the consciousness of the American army. We must stop our addiction to oil, and for the Pentagon, it's become a priority.
Why in God's name are we sending $300 billion a year abroad, most of it to the Middle East, to countries that are financing the same people who did to us what happened on 9/11? And energy independence, I would say we want to reach the state that no American fighting man or fighting woman ever has to die because we're worried about our energy sources in the Middle East. Let's produce it here. If we produce it here, it's good for the economy, good for the environment. We can withstand natural disasters, and we can tell all these petty dictators, kiss off.
The Green Revolution therefore aims at facing 3 crises, which are deeply related. Solving the security crisis by leaving the exploitation of oil is also solving the environmental crisis by investing in renewable energies, and therefore come out of the economic crisis through a green boom. In Washington during the Bush years, oil lobbies were in control of this situation. They blocked almost every piece of legislation for the country. All international treaties dealing with the environment, like the Kyoto Treaty, for example. On a federal level, the status quo was basically the rule.
For America, complying with those mandates would have a negative economic impact, with layoffs of workers and price increases for consumers.
However, contrary to what is believed, this green revolution was already in progress in several states when Bush was in power. In short, America's citizens, companies, and governors had anticipated the change of wind for more than a decade. And thanks to the initiatives of Governor Rendell, Pennsylvania is now part of those states.
When you think that almost half the states have stopped waiting for the federal government to have renewable energy mandates and have struck out on their own, that has to count for something.
20 years ago, Pittsburgh was the most polluted city in the United States. At the time, a dark cloud was hanging over the capital of steel works. Pittsburgh was then known as the 2 t-shirts a day city because pollution darkened our clothes. Today, it's one of the 10 cleanest cities in the world. And all thanks to the vision of one man, Governor Rendell. It's the story of a governor who believed before others did.
I was looking to the future. I wanted to make sure that we could continue to grow and continue to be at the head of the curve. And I believe that for the next 3 or 4 decades, it's going to be green energy that's going to be to the worldwide economy what information technology and life sciences have been for the last 15 years.
One example of this dynamism, the University of Pittsburgh. It's opened a green department. It trains the environmental architects and designers of tomorrow. Students rehabilitate the underprivileged neighborhoods with their professor Steve Lee. They put their skills to the test and try to turn old houses into environment-friendly houses. This house, currently under construction, should look like this in a few months. Here we talk about energy saving, recycling, isolation, daylight, organic garden. Dennis is the manager of this renovation.
There's a really huge push in the architectural industry right now to move towards green design, green practice. There is a future in sustainability and green design practices, and that's where, and I do believe there are jobs in it, especially in America, where we're continuing.
If you look at the total amount of energy consumed in the United States, about 25% of that energy is consumed by houses, about 28% of that is consumed by automobiles, the rest of that is consumed by industry and commercial buildings. So if you look at buildings, they consume over 60% of the energy consumed in the United States and contribute over 1/3 of the greenhouse gases. Architects applying age-old principles of daylighting, of appropriate windows, appropriate proportions for the buildings, we could save a tremendous amount of energy and dramatically reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that are being emitted just by proper design. Now we have a whole new industrial revolution that is around green, and the culture of this school is to continue to train those that are best qualified to solve the problems of the world. And what the challenges we're facing now have a very strong environmental focus.
We're ready for this push towards that, especially, certain things happening. For example, our president who's come in and is pushing for this change in green design, green practices. So I believe America is ready.
This city is a model in terms of green architecture. Here we're building the PNC building, one of the largest banks in the United States, which has decided to turn green. Gary J. Solson is an engineer specialized in the construction of environment-friendly and energy-saving buildings. He supervises the site.
over 10 years ago, First Side Center was under construction, and we decided to build it as a green building. And since that point, we have gone on to construct well over 70 green buildings. We have over 55 of them LEED certified as of today, and a number of others in the process. And we have more green buildings than anyone in the world. We are fully committed to doing this for all buildings we're currently building and all buildings we're building in the future.
An environment-friendly building doesn't carry any lead or toxic paint. It uses natural and energy-saving sources of lighting, a natural air conditioning system, a more efficient isolation, and all of it for a cost similar than for a standard building.
For us, it's not a new way of thinking, it's a way of life. When we build buildings, we don't think about building them green or building them not green. We only do it one way. And we do it because we think it's the right thing to do.
To the image of Pittsburgh, it's the entire country being built up again. The United States plans to build 5,000 green buildings within 2 years, a real policy of reconstruction work. If Edward Randall put all his influence into the battle for renewable energies, it's foremost to create green jobs. It's not a coincidence, actually, if he was spotted by Obama to become Secretary of Energy. For years, he's multiplied initiatives. He's convinced a Spanish company, Gamesa, a world leader in windmills, to settle in his state. And in 2006, he inaugurates the opening of the factory.
If you're a green energy company in Spain or in France or in Germany, you want to be in the American market. So a lot of the technology we import, which is fine. Take the example of Gamesa. They've made a major commitment to Pennsylvania, spending way over $100 million. They've set up 2 manufacturing facilities, one in the eastern part of the state outside of Philadelphia, one in an old steel town called Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And they've created over 1,000 new jobs in Pennsylvania just from one wind energy company.
Jim is a classic American driving a Harley Davidson. He's worked for 20 years in the oil industry. After that, he became unemployed. But after being unemployed for several months, he now works in this windmills factory.
To get into something like this on the ground floor seemed like a real blessing. You know, I got into the ground floor. It seems like that's where our future of America has to go. And yeah, for my children and their children, I'm really glad this industry came to this area, and really glad I got the job here. America's always been known to be open. I mean, we're like the melting pot of the world. I mean, all different cultures live here, and I just think it was a great opportunity for the United States to let a foreign country come in here that knows something about windmills, because this is completely new to us. And it was good for them to let this company come in here and build, and it gives Americans jobs. Even though it's a Spanish company, it's Americans that are employed here. So I think it's beneficial for everybody.
So is it so hard for a Spanish boss like Antonio Morera to enter the American market? Not necessarily. At a time when the unemployment rate is soaring, protectionist stance is shattered to pieces.
Also for us it was a change to work to Pennsylvania, since that the people who were working in this area in the former market, in specific markets like automotive, like the steels, we finding in this kind of workers at least the skill to have been working in the industry. Then they have this skill in his background.
For Jim, working in a clean energy company is starting to change his perspective. 10 years ago, what kind of American worker could hold that kind of statement?
If they can come up with something, I wish they would come up with something with beat fuel. I mean, I use heating oil in my house in the wintertime, and the expense of that keeps going up. And I'm more than open to any alternative source that'll, help put some money in my pocket.
Thanks to this factory and other green companies, Pennsylvania is ranked 3rd in terms of green job creation in the United States. If Pittsburgh has managed to take up the green challenge successfully, we shouldn't be deluded. the Green Revolution is still at its early beginning.
Well, certainly green is becoming more popular, both as a political idea and as an economic idea. But my own view is we're still having a green party, not a green revolution. People often come to me and say, we're having a green revolution. I say, really? Really? Us? Having a green revolution? Really? Have you ever been to a revolution where no one got hurt? That's the green revolution we're having right now. In our green revolution today, everybody's a winner. Yeah! Exxon's green, I read about it in their ad on the op-ed page of the New York Times. GM's green, now they put a little yellow cap on the flex fuel Hummer. We're all green. That's not a revolution, that's a party.
There's still a certain degree of reluctance, notably among citizens. Kurt, a mechanic for 20 years, has a front row seat to observe the behavior of drivers.
The people didn't want to change. It's hard to make people change. So people do things not realizing the after effect or the domino effect of what they just did. Here's another thing. The cost to do the change. Who was going to pay for it?
In the United States, the dollar is king. For citizens like Kurt, he cannot question the American way of life. Myron Ebel is one of the main opponents to the law on global warming.
I think Americans are very resistant to changing their way of life if it means adopting a much lower standard of living. We have the lowest consumer prices in the world here, the highest standard of living.
When gasoline was $4.50 a gallon, okay, where I live in Bethesda, Maryland, you could not buy a Toyota Prius. The waiting list was so long, they said, we're not even taking any more names. When gasoline is $1.50 a gallon, you cannot sell a Toyota Prius in Bethesda, where I live, okay? Because at $1.50 a gallon, no one wants to buy one. So price matters.
If the business world has accepted the idea, American citizens are becoming more and more sensitive to the issue of global warming, and they expect strong signals from Washington to change it. Today at the White House, Obama's will is clear. For the first time in the history of the United States, a president is struggling to pass a bill on climate change. The goal of this bill is to reduce by 20% the emissions of CO2 by 2020 and by 80% by 2050. It means that in 2020, there should be a reduction of 60 million cars out of the 240 million automobiles in the United States.
By passing the bill, Congress can act where Washington has failed to act over and over again for 30 years. We need more than the same old empty promises. We need to show that this time it will be different.
This bill is clearly the most ambitious part of Obama's program. In Congress, this bill polarizes very powerful and diverging interest groups. The future of America is at stake on this issue. The hearings and debates are public. The American democracy works full throttle. The battle can begin.
We want clean energy now.
In this arm wrestling match, there are environmental organizations. There are the fervent supporters of a very strict bill on climate change. Today, these activists from Al Gore's environmental group have come in great numbers.
The reason we are here is because there are a lot of executives from energy companies who are also here, and they're going to testify to weaken the bill even further. And we wanted to sort of give a show of force and let our congressmen know that that there is, some opposition to that.
The coal and utility lobbies in the country are powerful. They have a lot of money and they have a lot of power and clout. So we're trying to combat that.
The industry very much likes to maintain the status quo, and they talk a lot about clean coal, which is a technology that does not yet exist, and mislead the American people pretty frequently. So we have our share of reservations with them.
The debates are extremely intense. Each side defends its point of view during many hours. Talks deal with the green economy, reduction of pollution, patenting, clean coal, competitiveness, and the tone rapidly raises on each side. The confrontation continues backstage. Each side calls its counselors, who argue and weigh in the battle. We call them think tanks. These bodies of experts are typical of the American political system. Their role is to influence political decisions. Myron Ebel belongs to one of these Republican think tanks who oppose this bill, with the support of a large oil company very active under the Bush administration.
What the Obama administration is proposing and what Congress is now considering is to force new industries to come into existence which are not competitive with coal, oil, and natural gas, and which will drive up consumer prices considerably and slow down our economic growth. I think that the medicine is far worse than the ailment.
Bracken Hendricks belongs to one of the most important Democratic think tanks. Today, these people are the most influential advisors at the White House.
As we're looking to build a green economy, we're trying to identify the places where we need to pour concrete, where we need to roll steel, where we need to build buildings and actually make things, rebuilding cities, rebuilding communities. And we've discovered that a green economy is a more prosperous opportunity, a more prosperous economy, and a tremendous opportunity to rebuild the very foundations of our competitiveness and the growth of the American economy in the world.
In the rooms of the Capitol, each one moves forward his pawns and tries to convince the other. The coal industry is the most powerful actor of all. This sector will be the most affected by this bill, which could force the coal industry to drastically reduce its CO2 emissions. Because as we've seen it, research on clean coal is far from getting any result. Therefore, coal industrialists do everything to get derogations, allowing them to continue to pollute, at least until clean coal becomes effective. Meanwhile, their lobbying effort at Congress is quite intense. They fund media campaigns with hundreds of millions of dollars to influence legislation and make it inoffensive in the end. Marianne Lavelle, political analyst for 20 years, specializes on lobby groups. She works precisely on the connections between the industry and the bill on climate change.
No one spent as much money lobbying last year as the coal industry. What their goal is really to slow down climate legislation or make it ramp up slowly so that there's time for technology to catch up.
So if we pass cap and trade now, I think coal will be shut down before carbon capture and storage becomes possible.
So who is going to benefit the most from this legislation? Environmental lobbies or coal and oil lobbies? The battle is still ongoing, but one thing is for sure. This bill will be enacted in one way or another, and it will change the face of America. A few streets away from the Capitol, in the business district, it's a whole different perspective. Shell, Jeep, General Motors, BP, McDonalds. On the contrary, all these great companies want to anticipate the new environmental norms that will be imposed on them. In short, environmentalists and businessmen wage the same battle.
Big consumer names like Nike and Starbucks and eBay, and they would all like to see really very progressive companies would like to see action on climate.
Doesn't matter, we can explain to them that EPA will...
These businesses push for a legislation in favor of the climate. Surprising, isn't it? It's, however, the struggle of personalities like Jonathan Lash, the president of one of the most important environmental think tanks, one of the most influential environmentalists in the business.
It's a big deal. These companies are asking to be regulated. Why are they doing that? They're doing that because, first of all, they know that carbon limitations are coming and they want certainty. They just want to know what's the roadmap so we can go ahead and do our business.
Jonathan Lash embodies American pragmatism better than anyone. His strength is to gather around the table the actors that everything seemed to oppose, environmentalists and great industrial groups.
For us, it's about getting things done. It's about how do you change the world. And if you find an ally and that ally happens to be a businessman, but that's the most effective ally, well, then we're willing to work with them. And for me, it doesn't really matter that I may disagree with him on a whole set of issues. It matters more that we share an agenda in terms of environmental change.
In the image of Jonathan Lash, Vivian Buckingham heads one of the most important coalitions of businesses and environmental organizations. In total, 80 companies, among which the most important in the world, a coalition which weighs $7,000 billion.
I think it is business that will push this ball down the road. I think that it will come from grassroots and from grass tops, but it will be business because, as was said at the beginning of the last century, the business of America is still business.
Here, environmentalism has nothing to do with morality or good intentions. The goal is to face the post-oil era, to generate the potential billions of dollars from green business, and therefore get America out of the economic crisis.
The United States has a very long tradition of rolling up our sleeves and getting to work. When we understand a problem and we turn the ingenuity of our business, the creativity of our workers, and the power of our democracy to solving a problem, whether it's winning World War II, turning around the Great Depression, or putting a man on the moon, there is nothing that can stop us. I believe that global warming and building a green, low-carbon economy is exactly that sort of challenge. It touches on the greatest American tradition, and once we set our mind to it, we will succeed in this challenge.
If Americans have started late, today they understood the world economic stakes of the green economy. Their first goal is to become more competitive than China, their most threatening rival.
What I want to trigger today is the Earth race, a competition between America and Europe, Europe and China, China and India, India and Brazil, for who can be the first to design the technologies so men and women can stay here on Earth. We need the Earth race.
The world is looking to us to export some of those green economies, so we still have the potential to be the innovators, to be the exporters of innovation, and we can still be a leader.
You know, we can only do so much. But when America goes green, the whole world will go green, simply because of the role America plays in the politics and the creativity and imagination of the planet.
The American bulldozer is in progress to take the world leadership of the green economy. The new motto for America and for everybody else is, let's save the planet, since it's profitable.